أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the six-part series of conversations about the Nahjul-Balagha with eminent scholars to discuss the key concepts in this great book. For those who wish to have a deeper insight into the series may refer to the book called Glimpses of the Nahjul-Balagha by Sheikh Ustad Mutahari, which is available on alislam.org. In the past sessions, we have discussed the literary elegance by Sayyid Bakr Qazwini, social justice by Professor Hassan Abbas, as well as took a deeper look at the understanding of divine essence and attributes by Sheikh Kumail Rajani of Exeter University. Inshallah, today we continue with our fourth session with a conversation on theology and metaphysics in the Nahjul-Balagha with Samahat Dr. Sayed Moustafa Qazwini, who I will introduce momentarily. But to provide context for today's conversation on the profound subject of theology and metaphysics as elucidated in the Nahjul-Balagha, allow me to reflect that it is not often that we are exposed to such discussions, and the sad reality is that we have fallen short in our duty towards the Nahjul-Balagha and paid little attention to the intellectual teachings of Imam Ali alayhi salam. You know, the role of religious texts such as the Nahjul-Balagha is that they prescribe for us the way we ought to think and believe so that we may follow it in our ideology and our convictions. The benefit of these religious texts lies in their capacity to inspire, to motivate, to guide the human intellect by placing understandable principles and essentials at our disposal. However, it is pertinent at this point in time to share a lament on our approach to the Nahjul-Balagha as written or as shared by Ustad Sayed Mutahari. He said, and I quote, that we, the Shia Muslims, must admit that we have been unjust with regards to our duty to the man whom we more than others take pride in following. All our energy and labor have been devoted to proclaiming the Prophet's statements about Ali alayhi salam. And as Sadi the poet has said, that the reality of the musk lies in the scent, not in the perfumer's advice. To elaborate, Nahjul-Balagha gives us the opportunity to imbibe this inner fragrance of our faith as created by the divine perfumer himself. Instead, oftentimes we tend to spend time to continue with the metaphor of the perfume that we tend to admire the bottle and praise its packaging, never opening the bottle to smell its fragrance and acquaint ourselves with its real essence. So today, we're blessed to have a scholar who will help us open that bottle and allow us to benefit from this aroma of the divine perfume through the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Allow me to introduce. I know that Sayyid Mustafa is very reticent when we introduce him, but I believe it is only right and proper that we introduce his Sayyid as he deserves to be introduced. Born in Karbala, Imam Sayyid Moustafa Al-Qazwini is indeed a charismatic leader who has achieved international recognition as a religious educator, leader, and author. With his characteristic modesty and spirituality, he delivers to the Muslim and non-Muslim community access to authentic knowledge and teachings on Islam and has thousands upon thousands of lectures and presentations. These teachings, which are deeply rooted in the Holy Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He has been acclaimed for his practical ideas and realistic solutions to issues of concern to Muslims. His public lectures, TV appearances, writings cover family issues, human rights, religious freedom, non-violence, tolerance, as well as debates on discussion on democracy and other political issues. Imam Sayyid Qazwini and his devotion to share the visionary, historic, and pragmatic aspects of Islam has indeed impacted thousands, Muslims and non-Muslims. He is the founding Imam of the Islamic Education Center of Orange County, former president of the Shia Muslim Council of Southern California. He's also a graduate of the Islamic Seminary of Qom, holds a PhD in Islamic Studies from the UK, and is the author of a number of books. So we are blessed to have Sayed Moustafa Qazwini amongst us to talk to us about the metaphysics and the theology in the Nahjul-Balagha. But before I give him the mic and ask him the questions, allow me to share one particular incident that is etched in my memory. When I moved to Southern California and I go for the first time for Jummah prayers at the Islamic Education Center of Orange County, which was founded by Sayyid Moustafa Qazwini. After the Jummah prayers, as is a custom, we stand in line to shake hands with the prayer leader. And I saw this particular prayer leader in some kind of a hurry. And I observed as I tried to get in line to give my respects to him, that he kept walking. He kept walking towards where the women's section was. And he stands there right in the middle where the ladies were and started conversing, greeting the women in the congregation. And truly I understood now as to why the Islamic Education Center of Orange County is a unique progressive center which values everyone who comes to the center. And that truly is a mark of a man who understands today's realities and the aspiration and the expectation of the community. So with that said, welcome to this program, Sayyidina.
Thank you, Dr. Walji. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's my honor and a privilege to be at your service and the service of the mu'mineen worldwide today, speaking about not my attributes, but the attributes of God in Nahjul-Balagha.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us once again. So allow me, this is going to be a conversation with us, that Nahjul-Balagha is versatile and diverse in its multidimensionality. Indeed, scholars suggest that the Nahjul-Balagha adopts two kinds of approaches to the question of theology. The first one focuses on the functional world and its natural phenomena, reflecting the knowledge in the perfection of the Creator. The second approach involves theological and metaphysical discussions and are perhaps the most important of the concepts discussed. Sayyidina help us understand the significance of this and the importance of theological discussions in the Nahjul-Balagha.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The concept of monotheism is the soul and the spirit of the Islamic faith, is the essence of Islam. And it is the most critical and important subject in our religion. Monotheism is about the nature of God, the identity of God, if you will, the social security of God. Who's God? The definition of God. So it is very important to be sought and to be studied under the most able and capable scholars. And those scholars are the Prophet himself and his family, and his first lieutenant, his successor, his student, his disciple, his friend, his brother, his son-in-law, Imam Ali alayhi salam. And Ahlul Bayt, in fact, Imam Ali himself is a pioneer, a pathfinder in defining and interpreting the concept of monotheism for us. The Quran speaks about monotheism. The soul of the Quran is monotheism. But then the first person who came and who translated and interpreted this concept in the Quran was Imam Ali alayhi salam in his book Nahjul-Balagha, in his sermons. He did not write the book, of course. These are a collection of his sermons and sayings. So Tawheed and monotheism, the oneness of God, regulates for me my relationship with God, defines my relationship with God. And if I do not properly understand, accurately understand the concept of monotheism, I'll be in trouble. See, Dr. Walji, today we have an internal conflict among the Muslim Ummah regarding the concept of monotheism. There is a group in the Muslim Ummah who are Muslims. They excommunicate others. In fact, they excommunicate the majority of the Muslims. Why? Because they say to them, you do not worship God properly. You misworship God. So unless we understand the concept of monotheism, we are really not going to be able to worship God as He wants me to worship Him and as He wants me to understand Him. This subject is very critical. This is why we need to spend time. I invite the mu'mineen, the Islamic centers, mosques, especially within the scope of Ahlul Bayt tradition, to focus on this subject of monotheism, the oneness of God. This is the primary subject in our life. If we are able to understand this subject, really, to digest this subject, the rest are easy. The rest are easy. And by the way, Dr. Walji, Muslims, schools of thought in Islam, they differ over the identity of God. Behind me here, there are the 6 books in the Sunni tradition. Among them is Sahih al-Bukhari, followed by Muslim, followed by Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Nisa'i, Ibn Majah. Those are the top 6 huffaz, narrators of hadith in the Sunni tradition. They narrate in their books that God could be seen physically, but not here in this life, on the day of judgment. They narrate a story on the authority of Abu Hurairah, that the Prophet was sitting with his companions and it was a full moon. So he points to the moon, to the full moon. And he says to his companions, you will be able to see your Lord as we are seeing the full moon now. You will be able to see your Lord, physically to see Him. We don't accept that. Why? Because it is contrary to the basic tenets of monotheism. God cannot be seen neither today nor tomorrow, neither in this life nor in the hereafter. God said to Moses, it's in this book, in the Holy Quran, إِنَّكَ لَن تَرَانِي. Lan in Arabic means forever, forever. You would not be able to see me. God does not possess a physical structure. He cannot be seen. So I just want to illustrate that even among the Muslims who believe that they are monotheists, muwahhideen, there are differences of opinion when it comes to the identity of God. So therefore, we follow those who are accurate, Ahlul Bayt. We follow those who are the students and the disciples of Prophet Muhammad. Therefore, in this book, Nahjul-Balagha, this is an encyclopedia, an ocean of knowledge embedded in this book, in Nahjul-Balagha. And by the way, this book, Nahjul-Balagha, is not the entire legacy of Imam Ali alayhi salam, not his entire intellectual legacy. Many of his legacies, many of his sermons are lost. They could not compile them for many reasons. But what we have in this is very rich. This is an encyclopedia of knowledge, which you really alluded to in the beginning, that we must, every Muslim should obtain a copy of Nahjul-Balagha in his or her room, and we have to read it and we have to spend time to understand it. In his book, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he speaks about many philosophical and theological and metaphysical concepts. The first one is the existence of God, how God is different from us, the attributes of God. The attributes of God are very important. How do we define God? How do we understand Him? What is His identity? Also, he speaks about Jabr and Takhir, the concept of philosophical concept of predestination versus a free will. He speaks about Kitabul Mahw wal Ithbat, Yamhullah. This is taken from the Quran. Yamhullahu ma yasha'u wa yuthbit wa indahu ummul kitab. God, the expunction, God erases what he wants, what he wills, and affirms what he wills. He speaks about wahi, revelation. He speaks about ilham, intuition. And there are many other subjects that are covered, which are really very essential and very important. And this is the stepping stone to understand Islam. If we don't understand monotheism, these metaphysical, theological, philosophical concepts, we are not going to understand the entire religion. So the first step into understanding the Holy Quran, understanding the Islamic faith, is to understand the concept of monotheism from the viewpoint of the Quran, the Prophet, and Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Jazakallah. Thank you, Sayyidina. So, in that elucidation, you told us what perhaps monotheism is not, what Tawheed is not. So now tell us, particularly as monotheism is discussed in various sermons in the Nahjul-Balagha. I mean, sermon number 1, 65, 152, and many others. Help us define what monotheism is and its multiple dimensions as elucidated or described by Imam Ali alayhi salam, the actual subject of Tawheed and monotheism.
Imam Ali in his sermons, as you rightly said, especially sermon 186, probably the most important sermon that discusses, and also sermon number 1, discusses the attributes of God and how God is different from other beings. And remember, Imam Ali came to a society which most of them, in fact, all of them were new converts. Before that, they were pagans. They were worshiping pagans, idols. So he's speaking to a community, to a society that they freshly accepted Islam. They freshly, joined the club, if you will. Before that, they knew nothing about God. They associated with God, partners. They worshipped idols. They were polytheists. So when he speaks to them, you have to consider, now when we study, we have some background about Tawheed when we read Nahjul-Balagha. But those people who were listening to him for the first time, wow, they are hearing something for the first time. Nobody explained this to them. Nobody. Maybe before Imam Ali, the Holy Quran, but also the Quran does not expand on these concepts. Don't go into details. Quran is headlines. Speaks about headlines. When he mentions the Tawheed, God speaks about the headlines. Imam Ali comes and he elaborates on these concepts. So Tawheed is the proclamation of God's oneness, God's sovereignty, God's majesty, power, transcendence, and integrity. And the best chapter in this book, the Holy Quran, to summarize, only 5 verses with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, 5 verses, is chapter of Ikhlas, 112, towards the end of the Quran, which we read. Most of the time we do read this chapter, Ikhlas, sincerity, in our 5 daily prayers. Qul huwallahu ahad. Say, He, God, is one. And I'm going to elaborate later on the meaning of one. What do we mean by one? What is one? Is this numerical one or something else? So, Qul huwallahu ahad. He, God, is one. God, the eternally sufficient. God, the eternally sufficient unto himself. Allahu Samad. This is the definition of Samad. Eternally sufficient unto himself. He is self-subsisting. He is free of all needs. Allahu Samad. Lam yalid, he begets not, nor walam yulad, nor was he begotten. And this is also important. And none is like unto him. Walam yakul lahu كفوا أحد. And then Tawheed has dimensions, 4 dimensions. Some scholars added a 5th element to the Tawheed. First, Tawheed al-Dhat, the oneness, the unity of the essence of God. God has an essence, okay? What is his essence? How do we understand the essence of God? How the essence of God is different from our own essence. How is that? So Tawheed al-Dhat means simply, I will simplify things. Tawheed al-Dhat means that God is infinite. Every creature, every existent in this universe is finite. Finite means bounded and limited by time and space. Everything in this universe, including the galaxies, they are bounded by time and space. Even though this book says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ, the heaven we created with might, with power. بِأَيْدٍ means with power. And we are ever expanding it. So this universe is ever expanding. Every second that passes by, this universe is getting bigger and bigger. But yet, at the end of the day, it is still bounded by space and time. And everything that is bounded by space or time will perish. One day will perish, except God. God is unlimited. God is limitless. God is unbounded. God is infinite. He has no limits. And therefore, philosophers, let me borrow some of their expressions, though it is a bit difficult to translate it, but I'll do my best. Philosophers say, محدودية الوجود ملازمة للتلبس بالعدم, meaning that the boundedness, the limitness of the existent, the world of existent is limited, is bounded, okay? It has boundaries. This means that it is equal to be prone and apt to vanishing, to perishing, to be voided. When something is limited, once you say this is limited by time and space, then definitely you are saying that this thing is going to go away. One day is going to perish. And this is exactly what the Quran says. Quran says, مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدُ وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. What you have is going to yanfad, perish, comes to an end and goes away. On the other hand, وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. Whatever God has remains, stays there, endures, doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. And therefore, God says in the Quran that nothing in this universe is true or reality except Him. According to some philosophers, we are shadows. We are not realities. We are not real. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهِ. This is in the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Hajj. Surah Al-Hajj, verse 62. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْحَقِّ وَأَنَّ مَا يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ الْبَاطِلِ. The only reality, the only truth in this universe is Him, Al-Haq, because He doesn't perish. He's there. All other things, including mankind, including everything in this universe, is perishable. We have an expiration date. When you go to the supermarket and you buy something, a good, they have an expiration date. We all have, everything in this universe has an expiration date. Even the solar system that is millions of years old has an expiration date. One thing does not have an expiration date, and that is God. That is God. وَأَنَّ مَا يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ الْبَاطِلِ. We're going to disappear one day. In another verse, كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَالِكٌ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ. Everything in this universe, هَالِكٌ, perishable, except the face of God. In Surah Al-Rahman, we memorize this. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. All that is upon earth passes away, whether it's on earth or in this universe. And there remains the face of your Lord. Your Lord does not go away. So this is basically the first element in monotheism, Tawheed al-Dhat. Do I have time to go to the second, third, and fourth?
Please, at the same time, if I may, if you can also tackle the issue of the essence when we talk about Wahid and Ahad, the numerical concept, which can be contained within this discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to do this now? Wahid and Ahad?
Please take, let it follow your fluidity. MashaAllah, we are really benefiting from this.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Wahid and Ahad. The Quran uses both terms, and Imam Ali himself in Nahjul-Balagha, in his sermons, uses both. He uses Wahid and he uses Ahad. There is a difference between them. Though the root of both words is one, but when you examine the meaning, it is vastly different from each other. Wahid, la in huwa illa ilahun wahid. The Quran says ilahun wahid. He uses the term wahid. Okay, wahid is a reference to the meaning that God has no similarity in this wujud, in this existence. He is unique. The uniqueness of God, the incomparability of God. He's unique, nothing like unto him. And this is what laysa kamithlihi shay in Surah Ash-Shura, which is chapter 42 in the Quran. God says laysa kamithlihi shay. Nothing is like him. You cannot liken God to anything in this universe. And he has no resemblance, no match. This is the meaning of Wahid. This is the meaning of Wahid. What is the meaning of Ahad? The meaning of Ahad is that God is uncomposed, unstructured. See, me and you, Dr. Walji, and everything else in this universe, including the atom, there is nothing smaller than the atom, has a structure, composition, made of several parts, numerous parts. Except God. God is uncomposed. God is unformulated, unassembled, does not have parts or components. We need these parts. Now that I am talking to you and seeing you on this screen, you know how many cells are working together now? How many parts of my body are working together now to be able to see you and talk to you and understand you and listen to you? Millions of things. God is not like that. God, according to philosophers, dhatuhu basita. His structure is unassembled, has no components. Because if it has different components, if God is structured and made of different components, then in order for him to function, one component needs the other. They have to work in harmony. And once you say they need the other, then God is not free of all needs. Whereas in the Quran, the most important attribute of God is self-sufficient. Ya ayyuhan nas, antumul fuqara'u ila Allah wallahu huwal ghani. Ghani here means he is free of all needs. According to Imam Hussein in Dua Arafah, the dua that we recite, the Hujjaj recite on the day of Arafat, Imam Hussein says God does not even need himself, let alone others. This is a huge, Dr. Walji. He doesn't need himself, let alone needing others. So God is self-sufficient. And therefore, those who were around Arabia at that time, whether they were pagan Arabs or Persians, they believed in multiple deities, not one. They worship multiple. This is why when Prophet Muhammad came and said to them, there are no multiple gods or deities, they were surprised. In Surah Taha, they said, أَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا? Is Muhammad crazy? He made all these deities into one? Is that what he's saying, suggesting? أَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عُجَابٌ. This is something astonishing that Muhammad is talking about. We never heard of this before. We never heard of this before. Because they were used to different deities. And some of them were Jibt and Taghut. Jibt, the magic and the sorcery. They brought them, they placed them on the top of the Kaaba, and God says in the Quran, in Surah An-Nisa, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا نَصِيبًا مِنَ الْكِتَابِ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْجِبْتِ وَالطَّاغُوتِ. Not only the pagans, even the Jews at that time, they believed in several deities. They did believe in that. Yes, even the Jews. This is why this is a reference in the Quran. Reference to the Utu Nasiban min al-Kitab, they received a portion of the book, meaning the Torah. Yu'minun, they believed in Jibt and Taghut, a portion of the book. So some of the Jews of Medina at that time, they did believe in sorcery and magic and superstitions. And the Christians, of course, God says about them, لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا. Indeed, they have committed blasphemy, those who say, قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثُ ثَلَاثَ. God is one of a three in the Trinity. وَمَا مِنْ إِلَهٍ. God says there is no deity, there is no Lord, except إِلَّا إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. So this is the difference between Wahid and Ahad. Wahid, a reference to the uniqueness of God's character. He's unique. Therefore, we don't have a portrait of him. Some people ask me that, look, Christianity, they have portrait of Jesus, they have sculpture. In Buddhism, they do have. Hinduism, they have. All other religions. You guys, you don't have any pictures, any portrait of your Lord. I said, yes, this is exactly the difference between Islamic monotheism and other religions. Because God, no, if you bring the best artist today and tell him, draw a picture of God, he says, I'm sorry, because God has no resemblance. No resemblance. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. He does not have any resemblance in this universe. Therefore, sorry, we don't have any sculpture of God. We don't have any portrait of God. Whereas others, they do. Others, they do. They draw their pictures. When you go to their temples, their churches, you can see God. He's visible there. And Ahadiyya means, of course, as I mentioned, that God is, he is not assembled of parts. He is not structured. So let's go now to the second type of Tawheed, which is Tawheed al-Sifat, the monotheism, the unity of the attributes. Scholars tell us very simply that as-sifatu aynu dhat, the attributes of God are his essence, not separated from his essence, are indivisible, indispensable from his essence. How do I explain that? See, Dr. Walji, you and me, when we were born, we knew nothing. We were not knowledgeable. وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. God took you out of your mother's wombs, while may Allah, inshallah, bestow recovery and shifa, healing on your honorable mother who's in the hospital, and I ask the mu'mineen to pray for her. We came out of other mother wombs knowing nothing. لا تعلمون شيئا. Then slowly we started to pick up, slowly. One day we might reach a point, I don't like to say that, but it happens. We might reach a point that again, God says in the Quran, that you go back to the zero, that you forget everything. That does not happen to God. God is omniscient. Omniscient means that he is knowledgeable from day one, where he has no day one, to the last day where he has no last day. His knowledge does not fluctuate. Impossible. It doesn't happen to him. We cannot say today God knew about this concept, tomorrow he's going to forget it, or today he didn't know, tomorrow he's going to discover a new thing. Nothing will happen to his knowledge. His knowledge is stable, does not fluctuate, does not go up and down. Same thing, God is omnipotent, kulliyul qudra. His power, his energy, his authority is exactly the same. Neither decreases nor increases. So these are the attributes of God. They are his essence. You cannot separate between his essence and his attributes. Why? Because he's eternal. One day we are wealthy, the other day we are poor. One day we are healthy, maybe the other day we are sick. One day we have more knowledge, the other day we have less knowledge. One day we are more influential, the other day we are less influential. But when it comes to God, his attributes are exactly the same. And the best chapter in the Quran, in fact, it's a verse, not a chapter, Surah Ayatul Kursi. In Surah Al-Baqarah, that is the best identification of God about his attributes. Allahu, verse number 255. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayy, the living, al-hayy, al-qayyum, qayyum, self-subsisting. We need help from others. We cannot stand on our feet unless we have support. God is self-powered, self-subsisting, self-supported. He's free of all needs. The only power in this universe, which is really original, it's not borrowed or taken from other sources, is the power of God, the energy of God. Hayyul Qayyum, la ta'khudhuhu sinatun, no slumber overtakes him, neither sleep. Allahu la ilaha. And the Prophet says to Imam Ali, read this chapter, this verse, every single day, at the beginning of the day, when you go to your bed, at the middle of the day, Ayatul Kursi. It's a very short, but powerful, meaningful. In fact, the essence of Quran is Surah Al-Baqarah. We have been told by the Prophet, the essence of Quran, the jewel of the Quran is Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 2, and the essence and the jewel of Surah Al-Baqarah is Ayatul Kursi. So we have to read this. So this is the second, Tawheed al-Sifat. Then we come to Tawheed al-Af'al. Tawheed al-Af'al means that we believe that the only effective, influential, capable power in this universe is God, and God alone. His power is independent and sovereign. Every other energy, every other power that we have in this universe is muktasaba, being derived from God, not original, not independent, derived from God. And that is the meaning of Tawheedul Af'al. That is the third dimension. Remember, the first dimension was Tawheedul Dhat, the unity of the essence. The second one, the unity of the attributes. This is the third one, the unity. And Imam Ali speaks about this in different sermons in Nahjul-Balagha, about the unity, the oneness, the integrity of the af'al, the deeds of God. And he says, God is the only efficacy, effective power in this universe. His qudra, his power is dhatiyya, self-powered. It's not taken from another source. Whereas every other power other than him is muktasaba, being taken from other sources. So that is the third one. Now, if we say so, where does the power of Jesus, when Jesus, God says in this chapter, Surah Al-Imran here, the third chapter, verse 49, that I created for you, I healed, I know the unseen, I know what you store in your homes, what you eat and what you store. I can heal the sick, I can resurrect, give life to the dead. He says this in chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran 49. Where does he bring his power from? Is it independent from God? If you ask Christians, they say independent. This is why he's the Lord. But if you ask the Quran summarizes it in one sentence. He says, bi'idhnillah, with God's leave and with God's permission. all the energy, the power, the miracles that I perform, it's with God's leave. Otherwise, I cannot help myself, let alone helping others. Because the only energy in this universe, the only organic, original power and energy is the energy of God. But then, if we have time at the end, Dr. Walji, remind me to answer this question, then why do we ask imams or the prophets for help? Please remind me, because this is very important, to put it into perspective. This is very important, but remind me later on. Let me finish with the fourth element of the Tawheed, monotheism, and the most important element. The most important element in Tawheed is Tawheedul Ibadah, the oneness of the worshiping. That we worship only God and we worship nothing but God. Nothing but God. And God said, we endowed every prophet with this responsibility, that when you go to your community, tell them that you worship none but God. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They have not been commanded but to worship God, mukhlisin, with sincerity, meaning your worshiping of God has to be completely dedicated to Him. No association with anything else other than God. And that is the meaning of Tawheedul Ibad. Ibrahim alayhi salam says, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. My rituals, my servitude, my life, my death, my thoughts, every step I take in this life is dedicated for God. لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. He has no associates or partners. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ. This is how I've been commanded. وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. I am the first one to submit to God. And also, Dr. Walji, please remind me again to elaborate on this, because some people say, you worship imams, you worship the prophet, don't ask from them because they have nothing, they are dead, they have no power. Also remind me to elaborate on this later on, inshallah. So this is the meaning of monotheism in a brief, and also the four main dimensions of monotheism and Tawheed.
Jazakallah. So before I go to the final question in terms of what you are alluding to, let's talk a little bit about the existence of God as propounded in the Nahjul-Balagha. So to help us understand better, tell us, how God's existence is different from our existence. You have alluded to that, and I'd like you to sort of elaborate on that, to say, how does this understanding kind of contradict, again, as you referred to before, the understanding of Jesus being the Son of God, though you have covered this in your previous answer?
Yes. Dr. Walji, philosophers, Muslims and non-Muslims, believe that we have three types of existence in this universe. Three types. The first type is mumtani'ul wujud, an existence that is impossible. It doesn't happen. Such as what? A simple example of that. They say you cannot bring a state where it is day and night at the same time. It can't. And this is a theory in the Quran. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. Neither the day can override the night or overtake the night, nor the night can overtake the day. Each one orbits in its own orbit. So we cannot have a state where you can say now it is night and it is day. You can't. Yes, we have the dusk, we have the sunset, which is sometimes there is some light and there is some darkness, but that is a sunset. So that is mumtaniq, doesn't happen at all. Or another issue, another example. You cannot have haq and batil, falsehood and truth at the same time in one matter. So you can say this matter contains falsehood and it contains truth, either truth or falsehood. They philosophers say اجتماع النقيضين محال. It's impossible to bring two conflicting ideas together. It's impossible. Then we go to the second type of existence, and that is ممكن الوجود, possible, an existence that is possible. What is the example of possible? Is your highness and me. Meaning that it has equal relationship with existence or non-existence. So you could have been born and you couldn't, maybe your mother couldn't have, give birth to you. Our existence is not essential, it's possible. It's possible. The existence of man on earth, okay? So maybe you could be there and you may not be there. So that is the possible, the second one. The third one, that pertains only to God. And that is wajibul wujud. Wajibul wujud, the self-existent, the essential existent, the absolute existent. And therefore, the final source or the final cause of a creation in this universe should be self-existent, should be eternal, and that is God. So this is, in philosophy, how God is different from us. Then we come to his attributes. Why Jesus cannot be God? Because Jesus was finite. Jesus needed to eat, to drink, to sleep, to rest. He needed to breathe. He needed to clothe himself. In order for him to survive, he needed millions of things. And he was completely dependent, not independent. He was not self-sufficient. And this is why he says that me and my mother, kana ya'kulan at-ta'am, they would eat food. They needed to survive. So he cannot be, because he's not self-sufficient. When he's not self-sufficient, it means he's bounded and restricted by what? Do you remember the two things? By time and space. So if Jesus is sitting here now, he cannot be in the next room. If he's in LA now, he cannot be in Houston. Maybe his picture can be in Houston, Texas, but not himself, okay? And if he lived during this time, this era, he cannot be before it or after it, because he will perish, because he's restricted by time and space. And therefore he cannot be the God. He can't be God. And in fact, the idea of the divinity of Jesus did not come from him. Quran says, God asked Jesus, Ya Isa, أأنت قلت للناس اتخذوني وأمي إلهين من دون الله? Was it you who said to your followers to take me as a Lord, me and my mother, apart from God? Jesus said, God, if I had said that, you would know. You would know I haven't said that. So this idea came many years after him. And the engineer and the architect of a Trinity in a Christianity is Saint Paul. Saint Paul, we need a whole lecture to speak about how Saint Paul shifted from being the staunch enemy of Jesus and Christians, and he went after them to persecute them. All of a sudden, in his trip from Damascus to Jerusalem, he saw a vision, and that vision tells him, oh, Paul, what are you doing to my followers? So he converted 180 degrees. And in order for him to attract the pagans, the pagan Romans at that time, he incorporated the concept of Trinity into Christianity.
Thank you, Sayed. So as we head towards the final minutes of this session, like you suggested, the pure understanding of Tawheed, as we have discussed, there is this concept of exaggeration, of gulu, which has become an active point of contention in some quarters, particularly within our community. the issue of wasila and things that surround it is compounding these discussions. So give us a sense as to how do we understand this, particularly say this is, tomorrow is the eve of the 15th of Shaban.
Yes.
And we ask the Imam of our time, we supplicate. So would that compromise the issue of monotheism? Obviously not, but we'd like to have some elaboration so that people can understand this whole issue of gulu and wasila as we understand it.
Yes. The order of this universe is based on the concept of cause and effect, sabab and musabbab, illa and ma'lul, cause and effect. God is the only force in this universe, is the only effective, influential and capable force in this universe. No doubt about it. But however, God created a system where he runs this universe. And that system is called cause and effect. I'll give you an example. Shifa, healing, is in his hand, in his control. Ibrahim alayhi salam says, وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ. Once I get sick or fall sick, God is going to bestow recovery and healing on me. But then God himself, he says there are means for recovery. You have to go to the hospital. You have to see a doctor. You have to take a medicine. Yes, I am the healer, but I have means for that, means and ways. Knowledge, God is the bestower of knowledge and wisdom. But how? How does he do that? He says you have to go to school. You have to study. No one can go to bed tonight knowing nothing and then he wakes up in the morning and he knows everything. No one. God does not do that. He doesn't conduct his business this way. God says you have to go. If you need knowledge, you have to go and study. You have to see a teacher. If you need money, you have to work. If you need a child, you have to get married. So these are means. But God is the creator of cause and effect itself. Okay, God created the solar system, the sun, which provides us with light and heat and the balance. So the sun is created by God, and also the effect of the sun is created by God too, not by nature, by God too. Okay. And therefore, if we go to an imam and say to him, oh Imam Mahdi, please help me out. I need to get married. I need money. I need a job. I need a house. I need a good future. If you believe that he is operating independently from God, parallel to God, rival to God, then this is an act of polytheism and a blasphemy and heresy. But if you go to Imam al-Mahdi and you tell him you are the agent of God, God has agents on earth. Let me read for you. This is the Quran. The best evidence is this book. Okay, let me read the Quran. Isa alayhi salam here. This is chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran, verse 49. وَرَسُولًا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ أَنِّي قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ أَنِّي أَخْلُقُ لَكُمْ, I create for you, أَخْلُقُ لَكُمْ مِنَ الطِّينِ, out of the clay, كَهَيْئَةِ الطَّيْرِ, in the shape of a bird, فَأَنْفُخُ فِيهِ, I breathe into it, فَيَكُونُ طَيْرًا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, it becomes a bird. But the power of Jesus, the power of creation, the power of healing, and also the power when he tells them, I know what you store in your house. وَأُنْبِئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ, I can even tell you what you are eating in your homes, what you are storing. This is بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. His energy is being taken from God. Now you may ask me, why we don't go to God directly? God is there. So go and ask him, why do you take a side road? You are on the main road, on the main highway. Why are you taking a side road? In fact, God wants us to understand the value of those imams. Because if they have no privileges, and if they do not have these positions, then we are going to neglect them. Then they become, Imam Mahdi becomes just like one of us. Prophet Muhammad becomes one of us. God says to the Muslims, this is in chapter 4, if they are seeking forgiveness from God, let them come to you, O Muhammad. Let them come to you. This is in Surah An-Nisa. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ. They come to you, فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ. God is the bestower, the giver of forgiveness, but he has a channel, and that channel is called the Prophet Muhammad and his family. Okay? So God wants to draw our attention to their significance. He can do the job. Another example, God is the one who causes life and death, but he himself says in the Quran, حتى إذا حضر أحدكم الموت توفته رسلنا. We send messengers to take his life. Sometimes he calls it Malakul Maut, whereas in fact it is him he's taking the life, but he has agents. He has managers who work for him. And God refers to the angels as mudabbirat, wal mudabbirati amra. Mudabbirat are those who manage things, those who regulate things. They work for God, but their energy is all from God. They cannot do anything without his permission. Let me end with something. This is, we have to pay attention to it. And that is the concept of tafweed. Tafweed means some people believe that God created the universe. This is a philosophical order in Islam. Mufawwida. Their name is Mufawwida. They believe that God has created the universe, but then he sat aside. He said, now that I created, I'm going to resign, okay? And then I will deputize certain people to run the affairs of this universe. So is this right or wrong? Do we subscribe to this or not? We don't subscribe to this. This is ghulu. This is ghulu. This is why Imam al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam says, al-ghulatu kuffar, those fanatics and extremists who believe that God created the universe and then delegated everything to angels, to prophets, to imams, and he's doing nothing, and they are working not without his supervision, independently from him. Those are called ghulat. Those are kuffar, non-believers. Wal mufawwida, those who believe in that God deputized and delegated affairs to others, are mushrikun, polytheist. And then Imam al-Rida says himself, man za'ama, who claims, who alleges, أن الله فوض أمر الخلق والرزق إلى حججه فقد قال بالتفويض, that God assigned these two issues, the issue of life and death and the issue of sustenance, to the imams, then that is the tafweed, which is wrong, which is absolutely wrong and absolutely polytheism. Someone comes to Imam al-Sadiq by the name of Zurara. He was one of his disciples and students. He says, there is a man, I heard the man claiming that God, إن الله تبارك وتعالى خلق محمدا وعليا ففوض الأمر إليهما. He created Muhammad and Ali, and then God retired, and he said, oh Muhammad and oh Ali, you take care of the affairs of this universe. فوض إليهما فخلق ورزق وأمات وأحيا. So Muhammad and Ali both, they created, they sustained, they gave a provision, and they caused the death, and they will cause the resurrection of people. Listen to the answer of Imam al-Sadiq. Imam al-Sadiq said, كذب عدو الله. He lied. This enemy of God definitely lied. This is fabrication. إذا انصرفت إليه. When you go back to him, when you leave my meeting and go back to him, read for him this verse in chapter 13, Surah Al-Ra'd, number 16, verse number 16. أم جعلوا لله شركاء. Do they assign partners with God? لله شركاء وخلقوا كخلقه فتشابه الخلق عليهم. And they claim that those partners of God, they are the creators and sustainers? Nay, this is wrong. قل الله خالق كل شيء وهو الواحد القهار. Say, God is the creator of everything. Muhammad and Ali are nothing but slaves and servants of God. So if we go to them and we say, God, oh God, I want you for the sake of Muhammad, for the sake of Ali, for the sake of Imam Hussein, for the sake of Imam Mahdi, to bestow such and such on me, then that is the right approach. And this is what we believe. We don't believe that Imams or Imam Mahdi operates independently from God. Min dunillah, we don't. He operates bi'idhnillah, with God's leave, with God's prerogative, with God's permission. And that is the essence of monotheism and Tawheed.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Sayyidina, for that elucidation and the entire conversation, where it was an invitation to study and inquire, like the invitation of the Quran to study and inquire about the phenomena of creations and understanding our Creator. So we hope that we've been able to provoke thought and inspire our listeners and people who watch this to go deeper into these subjects. Because I believe that there should be nothing that can stop us from reaching the fullest potential of our intellectual understanding through revelation, and as so well elucidated by Sayyid Mustafa, through the house of revelation, the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. And that is the utmost limit of perfection concerning the knowledge of the divine. And we are blessed to have the Nahjul-Balagha as an eminent collection of the words of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and that we have scholars who can further elucidate this. So with that said, once again, I'd like to thank Imam Sayed Moustafa Qazwini for his time. I know how busy he is and how many presentations he does in a day. So thank you, Sayyidina, for sparing your valuable time for us for this series. And I also say thank you to Ummah, to the Ahlul Bayt channel, and in particular, Mustafa Abdi and his AV team to make this possible. Inshallah, same time, and I would say same place in this day and age of COVID, that the same Zoom connection, we will be there next week. We will have Sheikh Fadil Sahlani of New York, who will be talking to us about the ethical and the moral values of the Nahjul-Balagha. So with that said, I bid you farewell and say, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And thanks to you, Dr. Walji, for organizing such powerful and essential sessions on Nahjul-Balagha. And thanks to Brother Mustafa Abidi and Ummah and Ahlul Bayt and all the mu'mineen who participated. Wish you all the best, and we pray